With us now is Lobsang Sangay. He's the head of the Tibetan government in exile. Mr. Sangay, thank you so much for speaking to Deutsche Welle. This year marks 60 years since the Dalai Lama first set foot on Indian soil. What has changed in the past 60 years for the Tibetan cause?
On the one hand, since the occupation of Tibet, repression of Tibetans have continued. The photograph of His Holiness Dalai Lama is banned, and environmental destruction, cultural assimilation, all these are taking place. On the other hand, in exile, the Tibetan government exile, has not only survived, struggled, and has thrived in the sense that it's full-fledged democracy. We run our own schools, own hospitals, own settlements, own monasteries and nunneries. In that sense, if you compare with 60 million refugees and diaspora around the world, perhaps you might find a role model in Dharamsala where how a government exile is run democratically.
It may be a democratically run government in exile, but it's still exactly that, a government in exile. What are the chances, the actual real chances of Tibetan autonomy ever being granted by the Chinese, or even for a Tibetan government to take shape in Tibet?
Well, we will say chances are very high because, philosophically speaking, the China is ruled by a communist party, and we follow Buddhism. And Buddhism is 2,600 years old, and communism is just 100 years old. I know Karl Marx is 200 years.
But China is 5,000 years old. So, I mean, we can go all the way back in terms of how old things are. But then what are the real political chances? China refuses to negotiate or even talk to the Dalai Lama or to your government. The moment the Holiness Dalai Lama's name comes up anywhere, China completely cuts off all contact. So what real chances do you have?
Now, when you say real chances, we are talking right here in Berlin. This is where the Berlin Wall came down and Soviet Union collapsed. And no one in Germany, rather very few in Germany, believed that could happen. So you can go on. Aung San Suu Kyi was not free 5 years ago, right? Nelson Mandela was in prison for 27 years. This story being repeated, realistically, do you think you have any chance? Been asked to all these people, and reality is very different. So hence, we do think we have a very good chance of our freedom being restored.
Right. You clearly think there's a good chance, and hopefully that may work out for you as you're hoping. One final question. The Tibetan government in exile has been hosted by the Indian government since for the past 60 years. Would you say that in the past 60 years, the support that the Indian government used to show for the Tibetan cause is as strong as it was then?
Yes, as strong as it was then, because no country or the government has done more for Tibetan people than India. And for the last 60 years, there have been a steadfast supporter of Tibetan people, and it has continued till now, and it will continue for a long time.
I must ask you, every time Tibetans want to protest in the capital Delhi, for example, the Delhi police completely comes out on the streets and shuts them down. Would you say that as an example of Indian government support?
Well, diplomatically, they are obligated to act. Having said that, I have been a student of Delhi University. I have visited Chinese embassies so frequently, and I have also visited Chanyakapuri police station so frequently that the police officer knew me or all the activists then, So that will continue. But having said that, we always protest, we always organize activities, and Tibetan administration have been in Dharamsala for 60 years. It will continue to be like that for many years to come.
Mr. Sangay, thank you so much for speaking to Deutsche Welle.
Thank you very much. Thanks.